In December 2025, Washington state faced a huge natural disaster. A powerful weather system known as a Pineapple Express atmospheric river brought an enormous amount of rain. Over 5 trillion gallons of water fell across the region. This was a crisis that could be bigger than the very bad floods of 1990, which many people in the Pacific Northwest still remember well. Meteorologists who study weather gave serious warnings. They said the situation was catastrophic. This meant extreme danger and damage were very likely. Because of these warnings, Washington state activated its highest level of emergency response. Teams got ready to help people and protect areas. This event made many ask deep questions about the region. Was the state truly ready for such big floods? And how would the changing climate make future events different? This story will explore these important questions about Washington's readiness and how climate change makes it vulnerable. As the heavy, continuous rain filled rivers, they quickly began to swell. Water levels rose at an alarming speed. State officials leading the emergency efforts had a terrifying question on their minds. The defenses built to protect communities, like dams and levees, were about to be tested. Would these structures hold back the powerful floodwaters? Or was the Pacific Northwest on the edge of seeing a disaster far beyond anything it had ever experienced before?
The answer would soon become clear. 2. A river in the sky. Chapter 2 explains the weather event. It was an atmospheric river. Think of it like a very long, narrow path of water vapor, a river in the sky. This invisible river carries a lot of moisture far across the ocean. When this system reaches land and hits mountains, it releases a huge amount of water as rain. People sometimes call these specific systems a Pineapple Express because the warm, wet air often comes from tropical areas, like near Hawaii. In mid-December 2025, an especially strong atmospheric river hit Washington state. Over just 1 week, nearly 5 trillion gallons of rain fell. This is a truly enormous amount of water. To imagine it, this is enough water to fill about 18,000 Empire State Buildings. In some parts of the Cascade Mountains, rain fell very quickly, sometimes more than half an inch every hour. For example, a place called Paradise on Mount Rainier received 3¼ inches of rain in only 10 hours. Many lowland areas saw 3 to 6 inches of rain, while the mountain areas got even more, 6 to 12 inches. This powerful and dangerous storm formed due to a combination of specific weather factors. The ocean waters were unusually warm, and the air above them was also warm and moist. This warm, wet air flowed strongly and steadily, lining up with the jet stream.
There were also unusual weather patterns, even tropical storms, happening far away in Indonesia. All these conditions worked together to create what meteorologists called a perfect storm for heavy rain. An important part of this event was called orographic enhancement. This happens when the moist air from the atmospheric river is pushed up by tall mountains. As the air rises, it cools down, and this makes it drop even more rain. This effect makes the rainfall much heavier in mountain areas than in flatlands. This mountain effect would be very important. It would turn the normal rivers into much bigger, faster, and more dangerous bodies of water. With such an unprecedented amount of water pouring onto the ground, it had to go somewhere. The state's many rivers and streams were simply not built to handle this shock. They were about to receive a volume of water far beyond their normal capacity. The rivers get bigger. The rivers in Washington state quickly became dangerous. The heavy rain filled them up, turning calm waters into raging torrents. They grew wider and flowed faster with tremendous force. People watched with deep worry as the water rose higher and higher, threatening everything in its path.
The Skagit River was one of the first to cause major alarm. Weather experts predicted it would break old records by several feet. Near Concrete, the river was expected to reach about 47.62 feet.
This was far above its previous record set in 2021. Further downstream, in Mount Vernon, a city of 35,000 people, the Skagit was predicted to rise to 41.54 feet. This would surpass the record set in 1990 by nearly 5 feet and was 9 feet above normal major flood levels. The scale of the rising water was immense. Many other big rivers across western Washington also faced extreme flooding. At least 10 main river systems approached or went past major flood stages. The Snohomish River, north of Seattle, was forecast to reach 33.77 feet, just above its 1990 record. The Snoqualmie River, winding through areas like Falls City, reached heights not seen in 10 years. Farmland disappeared underwater, and main roads vanished. The Puyallup River, which flows through Ording, found itself at major flood levels. Water spilled into neighborhoods and made roads impassable. Smaller rivers changed dramatically too. The Nassau River, in southwest Washington, quickly transformed. It went from a depth of just 5 feet to nearly 20 feet deep due to the intense rains. What was usually a moderate watercourse became a wild, powerful torrent, overflowing its banks with an overwhelming, unstoppable force. Robert Ezell, the director of Washington's Emergency Management Division, gave a chilling prediction.
He stated that the strong walls built to hold back the water, known as levees, would not just be tested by the floodwaters. He warned that they would be over the top. This meant the very defenses created to protect communities were about to be defeated. It was a terrifying sign of the disaster ahead. 4. People must leave. The severe floods meant people in Washington state had to leave their homes. The disaster quickly moved to a human scale. On December 9th, Governor Bob Ferguson declared a statewide emergency. This action meant more state help could come, and he activated the National Guard. Over 100 Guard members went to the Marysville area, and more than 300 were ready to help with rescues by the next day. Many local emergency centers opened across the state, including in Snohomish, Pierce, King, and Skagit counties. Officials told people in low-lying areas of Skagit County to prepare to move. Up to 75,000 people near Mount Vernon and Arlington were affected. Towns like Rockport, Hamilton, Marblemount, and Concrete were told to evacuate. The American Red Cross quickly set up shelters and brought in supplies for those leaving their homes. Even before the floodwaters reached their highest, rescue operations were underway. Firefighters helped a family of 6 escape their home in Chehalis. They also rescued a truck driver whose vehicle was caught in rising water on Interstate 5.
Near the Skykomish River, fire personnel pulled 2 campers to safety. In other areas, rescue crews used inflatable kayaks to reach people stuck in their cars. One person, trapped in the woods by rising water, was carried about a mile to safety. At an RV park in Ording, 3 people needed rescue from their RV as the Puyallup River rose around them. These early rescues showed the serious danger people faced. With thousands of people moving and many more still caught by the water, rescue teams worked very hard. They raced against time, knowing the floodwaters would continue to rise and the worst was still to come. 5. The state is breaking. The heavy rain did not just make rivers rise, it also broke many important parts of the state. Roads were hit first. U.S. Route 2 was closed for 28 miles. Rocks, trees, and mud fell onto the road in many places. State Route 202 also closed because of too much water. Highway 162 east of Ording faced the same problem. Even a large part of State Route 906 near Interstate 90 was washed away. The strong water broke the road surface. Another mudslide blocked Interstate 90 near North Bend, closing eastbound lanes. These closures made it hard to travel across the mountains and between communities. People were cut off. The broken roads also hurt farms and businesses. It became hard to move food for farm animals, like cows, and to take dairy products to stores.
Trucks could not drive because their drivers had worked too many hours due to federal rules. This situation was bad for animals and for the money farmers earned. It was clear that the state's agriculture and its ways of getting goods to people were in trouble. More problems came with the power. Strong winds and very wet soil made trees fall. These falling trees hit power lines. Many homes lost electricity. Some people had no power for a long time. This made things harder for rescue teams and for people stuck in their homes. For example, over 3,000 customers in the Portland area lost power at one point. The constant rain also made the ground very soft. This meant there was a high risk of landslides everywhere in western Washington. The state's emergency management director said this risk would stay high because the soil was so wet. Landslides could trap people, block more roads, and destroy houses on hillsides. The storm was not just about water anymore. It was taking apart the state's basic systems. As the roads broke, power went out, and land kept sliding, a new kind of struggle began. Governor Bob Ferguson asked the federal government for help. He needed money and support for the state. But the Trump administration had said no to a similar request just months before, without saying why. Now the governor wondered if they would help this time. The question of federal aid became a new, important battle. 6. The Ghost of 1990.
For many years, the flood of 1990 was Washington's worst disaster. It set the standard for danger. That year, 2 large rain events hit one after the other. 2 people lost their lives. About 2,000 residents had to leave their homes. Total damage reached around $120 million. Homes were ruined, roads and bridges broke, and protective walls, called levees, failed. Farms lost crops and animals. Fur Island in Skagit County was hit hard in 1990. The levee there broke 2 times. About 500 people evacuated from Fur Island. Around 170 homes and farms were flooded. It was a time of great loss. Now, in 2025, forecasts for the new flood were even worse. The Skagit River was expected to rise much higher than in 1990. In the city of Mount Vernon, it would be almost 5 feet higher. The Snohomish River was also set to reach a new record, just above its 1990 level. This showed the current danger was bigger than before. Since 1990, communities tried to prepare better. They built stronger levees and flood walls. They also improved flood prediction. For example, in Ording, the mayor said the city had improved its flood defenses a lot in the last 15 years. These efforts helped. Without them, the city would have flooded badly at current river levels. However, the sheer amount of water from the 2025 storm was immense.
Even the new, strong defenses were at risk. Warnings said many levees could be over the top. This meant water would flow right over them, making them useless. It showed that even with modern improvements, the flood was too big. The people fighting this flood were not just fighting water. They were fighting the ghost of the region's worst disaster. Everyone wondered, would history repeat itself, but in an even worse way? 7. A future of floods. The huge floods in December 2025 made many people ask a serious question. Are these big floods the new normal for the Pacific Northwest?
Scientists have studied these powerful storms, called atmospheric rivers, and how climate change affects them. They say that a warmer world changes how these storms work. When the air gets warmer, it can hold more water. This means that when an atmospheric river moves over land, it can drop much more rain than it used to. This simple change has a big effect. Looking to the future, scientists have made some surprising predictions. They believe that extreme atmospheric rivers, like the one that caused the December 2025 floods, could happen almost twice as often by the end of the century, and the amount of rain they bring could increase a lot. In mountainous areas, the rainfall from these storms might become 200 to 300% heavier.
This means 2 or 3 times more rain in the mountains, which would cause even bigger rivers and more landslides. This flood brought a lot of water. It was strange because the area had a big drought earlier in the year. The heavy rain ended the drought, but it also caused terrible flooding. This shows a problem for the region. Sometimes there is too much water all at once, and sometimes there is not enough. This is like a boom-bust water cycle. Water comes down very fast, causing floods, but because it runs off quickly, it might not be there when people need it for the summer. Also, as temperatures rise, less precipitation falls as snow in lower areas. Snow melts slowly, giving water over time, but rain runs off fast, making winter floods worse and not helping with summer water supply. This flood was mostly rain, even in some mountain areas, because the air was warm. This made the flooding worse and did not build up as much snow for later use. This event was not just about a bad storm, it was a clear sign of a long-term problem. The science was clear. These storms were no longer rare events, but a preview of the future. The very survival of communities in the Pacific Northwest would depend on how they answered this terrifying wake-up call. 8. A warning in the water. The big flood in Washington state in December 2025 was much more than just a weather event. It was a clear sign that the warnings about climate change are real and happening now.
The huge amount of rain, nearly 5 trillion gallons, made people face difficult truths. It was a time for serious thinking, a moment of reckoning. This flood forced communities to ask important questions. For example, where is it safe for people to live in the future? How should new buildings be made to stand against strong waters? And how can towns and cities manage so much water when the climate is becoming unstable? The old ways of planning might not work anymore. This event showed that the Pacific Northwest needs new ideas for how to live with changing weather. Many people showed great courage during the flood. Rescue teams saved families from rising waters, and neighbors helped each other. This heroism was truly inspiring. But even with all this effort, the flood also revealed a difficult truth. Current plans and defenses might not be enough for what is coming. Levees built to protect towns were tested like never before, and some were nearly over the top, as Emergency Director Robert Ezell said. This suggests that the region's infrastructure, based on past records, may be too weak for future storms. The floodwaters were a powerful and destructive force, causing great damage. Roads closed and some communities were cut off. Farmers worried about their animals and crops. But the water was also a loud warning. It showed people that extreme storms, called atmospheric rivers, could become more common and much stronger. Scientists have studied this.
They say that because the world is getting warmer, the air can hold more water. This leads to heavier and more frequent rainfall, especially in mountain areas. These events, which once seemed rare, might soon be the new normal. So the December 2025 flood was a crucial message. It called for everyone in the Pacific Northwest to think about their future. What lessons will they learn from this warning? Will they make bold choices to prepare for these bigger floods? This means deciding if towns should move away from riverbanks, investing in stronger flood protection, and finding better ways to store and release water. The decisions made now will shape the long-term fate of the entire region. The future depends on how people answer this powerful warning from the water. What do you think communities should do to prepare for bigger floods in the future?
Hey there! Just a second before you go. If you learned something new today, please give this video a like, write your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. It only takes a second, and it really, really helps to create even better English videos for you. Your support means the world. Thank you.